Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I am going to be looking at the weekend of January the 31st and February the 1st, 2026. And at the end of a weekend, we have a full moon at 13 degrees Leo. And in this video, I'm going to be spending some time looking at this full moon and what it might mean. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching of the weekend. So here is the weekend's chart set for New York at midnight on February the 1st, 2026. So in fact, this chart is the chart for the beginning of the month, at least from a perspective of New York. So as far as what's going on in this chart, well, right at the beginning of the month, as we move into Sunday, we have the moon at 2 degrees Leo. So in fact, the moon goes into Leo at just around midnight London time. I think it's actually 9 minutes past midnight London time. That would be what? So if that's midnight, so basically if you're in New York, that would be 7 p.m. on Saturday, late Saturday afternoon if you're on the West Coast, other parts of the United States. So yeah, the weekend certainly starts off with the moon in Cancer for all of us. Then sort of later on Saturday in the Americas, the moon moves into Leo, then midnight in London time on Sunday, moon also moves into Leo. So yeah, by Sunday, for most of us, this is where the moon is. So there is a changeover, and so what that means is at the beginning of the week there isn't a great deal. The beginning of a weekend there isn't a great deal of fire. We've got Neptune in Aries now, but that's a transpersonal planet, and so it just could take a bit of time for the weekend to get going. But then the moon does get to Leo, and of course, why that matters is that the moment the moon moves into Leo, that means the countdown to the full moon has started. So the definition of a full moon is when the moon is opposition the sun. The sun is of course in Aquarius. So when you've got the moon moving into Leo, the moon is in the opposite sign of the sun, and then late on Sunday, the full moon comes exact. So the full moon isn't just a single point. It's kind of a zone of time, and so it's quite a contrast, isn't it? Moon in Leo opposition the sun in Aquarius. The sun in Aquarius. Well, the sun is in its detriment in Aquarius. It's not actually the greatest place for the sun to be in, and the moon in Leo, I wouldn't have said Leo is a great place for the moon either. I mean, the moon doesn't really have any dignity in Leo. I mean, it's not in its detriment, it's not fallen. So this full moon may say something about ourselves and our egos and how much attention we're getting and what we need to let go of. And the full moon in Leo, perhaps it's not about letting go. Perhaps we need to show more interest. Perhaps we have to be more definite about who we are and what we have to offer. But it's a big subject. Talking about a full moon, and at the end of the video, I will be talking about this full moon in detail. So aside from the full moon, so when the moon is in Cancer, right at the beginning of the weekend, we have a moon Jupiter conjunction. So that moon Jupiter conjunction may be sort of clearer if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Maybe if you're in the Americas, it might not be such a big influence. And as the moon moves through late Cancer on Saturday, January the 31st, the last day of the month, the moon makes a sextile to Uranus, trying to Saturn. Moon Cancer trine Saturn in Pisces. You might say that that is a sort of quite a stabilizing influence. Then Moon moves into Leo, makes trine to Neptune, opposition to Pluto. So yeah, that opposition to Pluto, as the weekend progresses, it could be quite intense, particularly as it's opposition to Mars as well. So we have a Mars-Pluto conjunction, still a relatively close Mars-Pluto conjunction, only 3 degrees out. So the Moon opposition, that Mars-Pluto, may create some drama, may create some intensity, and this kind of links in with the full moon. There is Moon in Leo trying to assert itself, trying to get some attention, but then you've got Mars-Pluto. Perhaps Mars-Pluto represents forces that are difficult to stand up to, but maybe there is a way around it. So looking at the weekend overall, there's quite a lot happening. And yes, the main event is the weekend. The main event is the full moon, and you could argue that everything is building up to this full moon. And so that's the picture. If we set the weekend for New York, if we set the weekend for Sydney, Australia, then at midnight on Sunday, the moon is at sort of 23 degrees Cancer. So the moon will go into Leo, obviously, sort of much later if you are in Australia or New Zealand, but not that late. I mean, I think that by the late morning, certainly by lunchtime on Sunday, the moon will be in Leo, and you'll be able to benefit from the fire represented by the moon in Leo. So if you are in Australia and New Zealand, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction may be quite prominent. It's particularly in the middle of the day on Saturday. So on Saturday, I would suggest that you really make the most of that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, because it's a fortunate aspect. You can take it, you can use it if you're in Europe, perhaps, but it will be sort of earlier in the day, and I think that perhaps that is the big thing about Saturday. Yeah, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, and sort of East Asia, you can benefit from some of the luck that is represented by that Moon-Jupiter conjunction. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. So the Earth is very much in Leo. There's the Earth at 12 degrees Leo, and it's because the Earth is always opposition the Sun. Got the Sun at 12 degrees Aquarius, so the Earth must therefore be in Leo. We still have that Mars-Pluto conjunction. Mars-Pluto conjunction geocentrically is 3 degrees apart. In terms of the heliocentric view, it's exact. So it may be quite an intense weekend where there's a lot of struggle, people struggling for supremacy. Maybe that's what people are looking for, what some people are looking for. And some people might be control freaks, not just people, but groups. They want to make sure that they control the agenda, and it might be the weekend, but things keep going on. There's still things that need to be done. It might be a good time to assert oneself. So maybe you can take this Mars-Pluto heliocentric conjunction and perhaps use it for your own purposes, whatever those purposes might be. I mean, hopefully they are good purposes, that you're not trying to do anything harmful. I mean, so do think about things from a moral dimension. And that Mars-Pluto conjunction, don't forget, is making a sextile to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So Mars-Pluto may be a chance to really confront some of the things holding you back. Not necessarily things holding you back, honestly, in a sort of personal sense, but we're all feeling constrained by the atmosphere we're in, the society we're living in, the political environment. It might feel overwhelming, but maybe there's something we can do about it. Somehow we can get through it all. So that's the general view, and now I want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of January the 31st and February the 1st, 2026. Aries. There is, of course, a full moon today. And, this full moon is going to, influence all of us. And, I think that the full moon, is going to perhaps have sort of peak influence, right at the end of the weekend, and perhaps, perhaps into Monday. So it may be, a slow burner to begin with. You might not be fully aware of this full moon, but once the moon moves into Leo, whether that's late on Saturday, early on Sunday, then the full moon really is starting. And I think this full moon for you, Aries, is about identity. I mean, identity matters. I mean, I'm talking about your identity. I'm not sort of talking about identity necessarily in a sort of a modern categorical progressive way. It's about, who you are, what you do well, what makes you special. That's the nature of moon in Leo. And there are things you excel in. But, sometimes, Aries, you can just feel ignored, like now. I mean, it's possible you feel ignored. You feel that you're just not being given enough attention. Okay, I'm not saying that you are being completely ignored. It just may be that other people, other groups are just not taking you sufficiently seriously. The view might be that you can just be carried along. So, if someone suggests something, you're expected to do it. Society has its norms, doesn't it? And, it's difficult to avoid these norms. There might be a norm of silence, not complaining, not making a fuss. There might be the norm of doing things that other people enjoy. If other people want to do something, want to enjoy doing something, then you should just fit in, and that's the way it should be. We don't want to stick out, do we? But with this full moon, I think, Aries, you should recognize that there is something about you that is different. You can do things in a way that is special to you, and your unique approach is probably the best approach. It might not sometimes feel like it, but that's because of the external pressure. And we're not just talking about a full moon, we're talking about the moon opposition Mars. And so Mars is, of course, your ruler, and the moon opposition Mars, or in fact, this full moon is tied in with Mars, to an extent. I mean, it's not exactly conjunct Mars, or exactly opposition Mars, but it's quite close. And I think that is a struggle. I think part of you, Aries, seems to think that you should fit in, that you should follow the collective will, and it might be easier, it might cause less trouble, but you kind of know that's not right. And don't forget that the moon in Leo, in its own way, is quite fragile. It's not the best sign for Leo to be in. I mean, the moon does not have any dignity in Leo. And so if there's something you want to do, something that is important to you, you might start showing some weakness. I mean, Aries is, of course, a strong sign, but you might just have some doubts, and you might just conclude that, all things considered, it might just be best to fit in. But that's not going to work, is it? Because if you try too hard to be like everyone else, or at least to make other people happy, it could backfire. Because if you are doing something which is fundamentally not you, you are going to feel irritated. And that irritation is going to make itself felt in all sorts of ways, maybe in unconscious ways, ways that you just hadn't intended, but it happens anyway. And sometimes in the attempt to create peace, perhaps by compromising, you create the opposite. You create conflict because you can't help yourself. Your irritation just seeps out, and you find that there's a misunderstanding and another misunderstanding. So probably, Aries, the best thing to do is just to accept yourself as an individual. Okay, Moon in Leo may be fragile, but overall, you have what it takes. And don't forget that the Mars is conjunct Pluto. That Mars conjunct Pluto. Okay, it's a few degrees out if you're geocentrically, but heliocentrically there is an exact Mars-Pluto conjunction. And with that Mars-Pluto conjunction, I really do think that you are able to hold firm. You are able to assert yourself. And if something is important, I think you need to recognize it. And what is more important than you and your free self-expression? Taurus. So we've got a full moon over the weekend. It's a full moon in Leo. And it might be a time, Taurus, to step back to some extent. Because, at the moment, as I've kept saying, we've got these 5 planets in Taurus, 5 planets in Aquarius, and these 5 planets in Aquarius, they want attention. There are things that they want to do, and you might at the moment be pretty focused on things that are important to you. And you might be ambitious, and that's great. I mean, that really is good. But sometimes you can be a little bit unthinking. You've made a decision that you're going to go in one way, and as far as you're concerned, you're completely in the right. You've got it all sorted out. You're ready to move. But in the process, there might be things you have been forgetting, and that may tell us something about this full moon. What are you forgetting? I think if one wants to point a finger at the precise thing that you might be forgetting, well, it would be the moon, wouldn't it? It would be that the moon is in Leo, starting to make oppositions to all those Aquarius planets, including making an opposition to the sun. So we have this full moon, and so perhaps there are certain aspects of your security system that you have been neglecting. And when I say security system, I'm not talking about sort of a literal security system, barbed wire and cameras and so forth. I'm thinking sort of more about what is important to you, to your family, for example, and your home. Making sure that everything is there for you. And if you forget that anchoring, then you could go all over the place. I mean, you might be just so focused on moving forward that you lose touch with where you've come from. And I know it's a weekend and people are supposed to sort of relax over the weekend, but we do have this full moon over the weekend, and somehow, Taurus, it does seem that there may be a few things that you just could be a little bit obsessed about. And maybe it's just a time with this full moon you need to just stop, take stock of what you're doing, and also take stock of what is important to you. You might have just been a little too extreme recently with all these planets in Aquarius, and there are some things which are perhaps slower and more basic, which you need to take into account of, and that includes other people. Might be members of your family, so or perhaps close friends, or something that just is important to you, and maybe also the past. That is perhaps one of the things about Aquarius playing Leo. I mean, Aquarius is quite a future-orientated sign, and so Taurus, you may be thinking about the road ahead, but what about where you have come from? And so with this full moon, it's just a time to just take a step back and to review your progress. Now, you don't have to stop everything absolutely. I mean, we've got 5 planets in Taurus until February the 10th. It just may be just over the next few days, it may be just a time, Taurus, for you to just realign. Now, another aspect we have is a quincunx between Venus and Jupiter. You've got Venus in Aquarius. Venus is your ruler, and it's making an 150-degree aspect to Jupiter. And again, that might be a sort of similar message to the full moon. There just may be something you haven't considered. You think you've sorted everything out, that everything really is in order, but Jupiter is saying, "Well, hold on, there is something else. There's something else that you need to pay attention to." And it's in Jupiter. It's Jupiter in Cancer. So with that Jupiter in Cancer, maybe about a piece of information, or not just one piece of information, maybe quite a lot of information that you should have taken into account. But you should be taking into account, and maybe this information has a slightly sort of emotional feel to it. Are you really taking into account other people's feelings, and what other people are saying? Because people can communicate in many different ways, and occasionally Taurus can be a bit too single-minded when you're listening, and you listen to what someone says, and you take what they say at face value, and you don't listen to, or you don't listen to the feelings or the body language. What else is being communicated in a non-verbal sense, and that's not just in terms of a spoken word, but the written word as well. So if you're listening to someone or reading a message from them, don't just take it at face value. There may be just something else you need to consider. There is a certain nuance there that I think you would be wise not to ignore. Gemini. It's probably good that the moon is leaving Cancer and moving into Leo. Of course, the moon may not move into Leo until Sunday, but it's getting there in the end. And why would that be a good thing? Well, moon in Leo, it's a fire sign, and it complements Gemini pretty well. I mean, Gemini and Leo are 2 signs that don't have much friction. They do get on with each other, all things being equal. I don't know, me and Leos. I mean, I don't really know many Leos. It's not a sign that I have a huge amount of sort of personal sort of knowledge of. So maybe to an extent, I'm being theoretical here, but Gemini needs some fire. That's what Geminis often need. Certainly I need fire. Okay, I've got moon in Aries, but I somehow think that moon in Aries, doesn't always function. I've got my sun in Gemini, moon in Aries, but it's that sort of natural inspiration that you kind of need if you're a Gemini. And so having a moon in Leo just means that you've got that spark. And I think that you sometimes need that spark to be able to sort of move forward and move away from just sheer theorizing. And that could be a good, it could be quite a powerful theme of the moon moving into Leo. And of course, it's a full moon, and so having a Leo full moon is I think probably what you need. So this Leo full moon could be about you having ideas. Some of your ideas may be quite wonderful, and your ideas may have been building up for some time, and you might actually be quite excited about your ideas, and it's great. I kind of can understand that. I was had a moment of feeling quite good, this morning. I mean, I'm making this video on Friday morning, and I was excited about something. I really thought, this is a great idea, and that might be, the Aquarius, having this idea. But so what? it doesn't really amount to anything. With Geminis, it's often the case that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and what is required. If you've got an idea that is quite cosmic, yeah, it does feel wonderful, but it's ungrounded. And what is needed to ground it? And there's just all that Aquarius, and that Aquarius, great sign if you're a Gemini. It can go in all sorts of places mentally and inspirationally. Well, maybe not inspirationally. In fact, inspiration may be the very thing it seems to lack. You have all these ideas, all these concepts, but where is the spark? And that spark can perhaps be provided by the moon in Leo. Now, moon in Leo is, in a way, not particularly strong. I mean, I know it's a fire sign, but moon in Leo, as I have already said, is quite a fragile placement. And so, with moon in Leo, you just have to try, and the spark is available, and but what you have to do is you kind of have to put in the work, and putting in the work means having a concept, but really looking at the details. What is the practicality of the matter, and how can you take the details and find the connection between them, and in the process be able to communicate it. And so that can be the problem. Thinking about something or feeling something wonderful, but how do you maneuver it? How do you write about it? How do you talk about it? It may not be easy, and this full moon is maybe showing you how. But in the process, it could be quite challenging. So what you might feel with this full moon in Leo, that you might feel, how are you going to talk? How are you going to get those words out? You might even feel tongue-tied because you don't know how to. You don't know how to communicate effectively. Of course, you know how to communicate effectively, but if you're talking about sort of high-level ideas, how do you bring them out into the open? And perhaps this full moon is going to help you. It gives you the impetus to bring your ideas down to earth and to make them real. So that's one way in which this full moon could work. I mean, the moon is opposition Mars, and so we have to say a few things about that. I mean, with moon opposition Mars, the moment moon moves into Leo, in fact, the moon makes an opposition to Mars, makes an opposition to Pluto. That could say something about how you communicate, and it's possible that you communicate in a way that is slightly clumsy at first. You're not quite sure how to get the words out, and you might get a response that may not be great, at least to begin with, because the words are not necessarily put together right. I mean, that can be how moon opposition Mars, moon opposition Pluto works. Also, if you're traveling over the weekend, certainly while the moon is in Leo, it just might be the case that things are more difficult than expected. Things take longer than expected. You might get angry about things taking too long. So if you are traveling, particularly on Sunday, particularly around the time of the exact full moon, I would, well, not just around the exact time of the full moon. The moment the moon moves into moon moves into Leo, which moon moves into Leo sort of fairly late on Saturday if you're in the Americas, sort of late afternoon, early evening, depends where you are, or that would be much later on Sunday if you're on Australia or New Zealand. But when the moon does move into Leo, and when it does make opposition to Mars, opposition to Pluto, just be careful how you move about, because things might not work quite as you expect. And don't get angry. Don't get angry if your car is misbehaving, or if the bus is late, or however you get around. And At least, though, that will be evidence that the full moon is working for you. And the broad message of this full moon is that the message matters, and also it's the way you think about it. And perhaps through talking, through writing things down, you can give yourself some real clarity. And once you've got that clarity, you can move things to the next stage. Cancer. Probably a mixed weekend. Maybe a weekend where Saturday is different from Sunday. I think that Saturday may be a day where things work to schedule. There's a sense that everything is well ordered. You can sort of naturally proceed from one thing to the next. Also on Saturday you may be feeling the effects of a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Okay, the moon and Jupiter conjunction won't be exact, I don't think, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, but still, it's there. And so through Saturday, you're probably going to feel that things are working quite well, and you're feeling relatively content. And if you want to be enthusiastic, I think that other people are going to reciprocate, and so you can be happy. You can enjoy other people's reaction to you. I think people will react in general in quite a sort of a favourable way, and you can make other people feel good about themselves on Saturday, and so your easygoing enthusiasm could make a big difference. I say easygoing; it's not the kind of enthusiasm that is sort of full of sparks and fireworks and anything like that. It's just something about you that is reassuring. Then the moon changes sign. The moon moves into Leo, and that does bring a change. Now, when the moon moves into Leo does depend on your time zone. Might move into Leo, I don't know, 4:00 in the afternoon or just after on Saturday if you're in California. It might not move into Leo until late morning on Sunday if you're in Australasia, even lunchtime perhaps if you're in New Zealand. So it does depend. But moon moving into Leo, of course, the moon is your ruler, moves into Leo, then it starts to make a full moon, and this Leo full moon, which is inevitable, it can't be avoided. Every year there will be a Leo full moon. This particular Leo full moon, it does sort of make oppositions to the Aquarius planets, and so for you, Cancer, it might be more challenging than usual. You will see that there are things that you do have to deal with, and at the same time, things might not be quite as simple as you had assumed they would be. Things might take longer, and it might at the same time be quite difficult to get straight answers. I mean, that's what you'd like. You want straight answers, but it might not be the case. And this is especially the case if you are talking about money. Where there's money, there is confusion. So at the end of a weekend, if you're trying to get straight answers about money, or even if you're trying to sort out your own money, you might not find the answers you're looking for. And talking about money with another person, or indeed talking about anything complicated, might just be a recipe for just further confusion, because not everyone is being straightforward. And I think that you perhaps need to accept that, and maybe that's part of the way all these Aquarius planets are influencing you. You would like things to be simple. Again, I'm not just talking about money. It's just the way people relate to one another, the way agreements work. Agreements. Well, they could be legal agreements. So things become clear. What becomes clear is perhaps how unclear things really are. So if you find yourself, Cancer, looking for a straight answer, then you might not find it. And you could say, well, just look at the law, look at the agreement, look at the way the words have been put together. That might not help either. And if you just assume that things are complicated, that you're not being told the truth, then that's probably the best approach. And why might you not be told the truth? It's not necessarily because anyone's lying. It just might be because people don't know, or worse still, they think they know. And of course, if they think they know, well, that can be terrible, because there is this sort of aura of certainty that some people have, but that aura of certainty is based on nothing. And so I think it's important that you don't take things at face value, that you are prepared to look at things in a sort of a much deeper way. And in the process, don't get too angry. Don't get angry at all. I mean, Moon is making an opposition to Mars, opposition to Pluto over the weekend. And so that might mean that there are things that annoy you. That you really want to express yourself and you want to tell someone how you feel. That's Cancer. When Cancer comes across something that they don't like, that someone's being careless, sloppy, they like to tell them. Cancer doesn't mince its words, very often, and so. There's then the question of, how do you express your irritation? There's always a right way to express your irritation, and there's a wrong way, and you need to be reasonable, but not be too reasonable. So, I'd like to be, a little more positive. I mean, I think I am being positive. There's no doubt about your power and your ability to get people to pay attention to you, and the best way of handling a weekend, particularly the end of a weekend, is to just assume that things just aren't as simple as they seem to be on the surface. Leo. We have a Leo full moon. And that is inevitable. Every year there is a Leo full moon. I mean, some years there are going to be 2 Leo full moons. If you had a full moon, right at the beginning of Leo's, so you might have a full moon at 0 degrees Leo, and then a full moon at 29 degrees Leo, or something like that. But there's only one full moon this year, and that full moon is at 13 degrees 13 Leo, and so this full moon is a time of reassessment, particularly in terms of other people. You're thinking about what other people are doing, what they are what they are presenting, and you can be quite judgmental at the time of a full moon, because if you think about it, this full moon is taking place across the main axis of your chart, or should we say the horizontal of your chart. Moon in Leo, the Sun in Aquarius, which is your opposite sign, and so that full moon can say a lot about relationships and how you are responding to other people and your impressions of other people. And it's not just about what people are doing in the real world, it's also what you are imagining they are doing. Because with all these planets in Aquarius, the moon making oppositions to all these planets, it's not just making an opposition to the sun. You are potentially doing quite a lot of projecting. I mean, projecting, of course, means that you are, taking your own material, particularly material which you are not utilizing, and you are dumping it onto other people. So people behave in a way that you find disturbing, and the reason they're behaving in the way they are behaving is just because they are living things out which you are not living out. So, if you are being passive, overly passive, for example, and you see other people, rushing around like balls in china shops or whatever, that means that they are living out what you yourself should be living out. And so, to an extent, you should perhaps regard other people's behavior as a reflection of you, and in fact, always, consider your own influence. If you see someone behaving in a way that, for example, is untoward, it may be that at some level you set it up. It's maybe a situation where the observer has an influence. I mean, the observer always has an influence, don't they? And I know that can be something in science. Observers watch atoms or subatomic particles colliding, and somehow I don't quite know how it works, but the very fact that there is an observer watching these subatomic particles is actually influencing the way these subatomic particles move. And it might be the case for you with the people around you, but you are influencing what you watch, even if you think you're not watching. Don't project more than you have to, and always consider alternative explanations. So, I mean, for example, it might be easy to place blame on someone because it's easiest. You regard them as being an autonomous being, perhaps quite a mechanistic being as well, and so if they do something wrong, well, it's their fault. But in fact, it might be that something else is going on, and you have your own influence, and that should not be neglected. Now, maybe I'm just making the whole thing too complicated. With a full moon in Leo, that can certainly say something about relationships and how you see other people. I mean, full moons, don't forget, are about awareness. Something is right in front of you. Something cannot be ignored any longer. So, if you are in a relationship with someone and this full moon happens, you start to see a side of their personality that you just hadn't seen before. And it's there. It's right in front of you. Now, what you do with that knowledge, well, that depends. I think that one of the problems with full moons is that they can certainly show you the truth of a matter, but just because you know the truth doesn't mean you change your behavior. You might just carry on as normal. You might notice critical things about another person, maybe flaws, maybe ways in which another person could undermine your interest, but still you just ignore it. You just assume it's all going to work out. But I would suggest that you don't ignore it. Now, that kind of depends on the situation. Now, if you have been in a relationship with someone for years and years, it's not like this full moon is going to cause too much damage. I mean, if you've been in a relationship with someone for years, well, every year there's a full moon in Leo, and the relationship has survived. But if you've been in a relationship with someone for a few months, or this is the first full moon you've had, then the full moon, might bring certain things to the surface, and it might make you aware of things. And when I talk about relationships can be about all sorts of things. It may be that it's a professional relationship, you're about to sign an agreement or something like that, and you just notice something. And that can be the good thing about this full moon. It can be about knowledge, and in certain cases, you might become aware that someone is messing with you, that someone is being manipulative. Remember this moon, this just before the full moon, we've got moon opposition Mars, moon opposition Pluto. This is all very much part of the full moon experience, and so you might be aware of how other people exercise power, not just individuals exercising power, but organizations, governments, local governments, friends, whatever. There is a power orientation to this full moon, and you just might become aware of it. And I think you're going to be particularly aware of it, not just because there's a full moon, but because the moon is in Leo, and with the moon moving through Leo at the end of a weekend, you're just going to be quite sensitive to all of this. And again, I think that's a good thing. It means that you can be, aware of what is going on, and awareness is really what this full moon is all about. Virgo, I think the weekend starts off, quite well. You'll find that, for most of Saturday, you shouldn't have too many problems dealing with other people. I mean, the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter, in Cancer. Okay, the conjunction, may not be exact, but it certainly gives you a lift, and I think that you should find that other people do make good company, and it may go further than that. I think in a general sense, you're going to be relatively lucky when you're with people, of course, with the right people, and it might be the case that other people definitely appear to have something to offer, and something to offer that you can benefit from almost immediately. Okay, the benefit might be emotional, but if you're feeling good about yourself, well, what more can you want? Now, as Saturday progresses, as you move into Sunday, things potentially get more complicated, because we do have a full moon. We have the moon. Moon moves out of Cancer, moves into Leo, and of course, when it moves into Leo, it makes an opposition to all those Aquarius planets. It doesn't just make an opposition to the Sun, and so how does that change things? Well, you start to realize that certain things are important, more important than you'd like them to be, and that might at least force you to focus on the more routine side of things. Everything should go to plan, but maybe it won't go to plan if you just leave it to its own devices. And so you need to watch what things are doing, how things are unfolding, but you don't want to necessarily be too focused on detail. There is a conjunction between Mars and Pluto at the moment. Okay, the geocentric Mars-Pluto conjunction might be sort of past exactitude, but heliocentrically, that Mars-Pluto conjunction, is exact. And with that Mars-Pluto conjunction, you can be quite focused on the way things are presented, and you want to make sure that things are just done properly. And if things aren't done properly, you might feel that you have to say something or do something, or maybe more likely to do something rather than say something. And it would be nice, Virgo, if just everything could be structured in an orderly way, but maybe that's not how it's going to work out. There could be some confusion behind the scenes, confusion that you don't really want to have to engage with, but it is there. And so you kind of got these two sort of opposite forces. On one hand, there is this sort of organizing force, and you want to perhaps be very much part of this organizing force, but there's also a disruptor. And perhaps that's what this full moon is talking about. Where does that disruption come from? It might come from things that you don't know about, or things that have just made their appearance. You thought you had considered all the factors, but then there was some other factor that you hadn't considered, and that factor might be psychological. It might be your own psychology. You might have made assumptions about the way you were going to respond to a particular situation, and then you end up responding in a way that is, well, frankly, surprising and in a way disruptive. So you could be the disruptor that you were so concerned about, and you can't just assume that you're always going to respond in the same way. So that is a feature of the weekend, particularly when once you've got this full moon coming into play. Now, this full moon for you, Virgo, might say something about health, and one does have to talk about health every now and then. Of course, I'm not talking about health in a way that is particularly serious or informed. When I say informed, well, as I kind of have to say, I know it sounds boring, but all I can talk about is lifestyle. I can't really talk about your health. I'm not qualified to talk about your health, and I don't want to create concerns where none exist. But the full moon might bring certain things to your awareness about your health, about how you are living your life, whether you're eating healthily, exercising properly, how you respond to a particular test result. Again, I'm talking about this in a very broad sense. For example, I don't know, I recently had some medical tests, and I just noticed that I just have, my cholesterol is really high, and so that of course has an impact. And you can say, "Oh, I've got high cholesterol." Lots of people have high cholesterol, but what are you going to do about it? And that's the question. Should you be seeking something medical, or should you, pills to get the cholesterol down, or just do something about your diet? I'm just talking about myself here. I'm just saying that there may be things to consider, things you observe, and you are observing, particularly now with this full moon. Maybe you have been told something about your health, or, for example, there could have been a test result or something that you hadn't really taken it on board. But perhaps now with the full moon, you maybe are taking it on board, and you're thinking, well, actually, what do you need to do? What should you do? Now, you don't want to be obsessed about it. I mean, you could be obsessed about it. There is a Mars-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, but that's not necessarily the right response. It's about saying, okay, you are aware of something. You are aware that things could be better, and then you do something about it. And perhaps you do something about it in a very sort of private way. So, for example, if you decide that you want to create some kind of new routine as far as your health and well-being is concerned, it's probably a good idea not to talk about it. Because, if you talk about it, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. I mean, I don't know how many people smoke nowadays, but, for example, if you make an announcement, if you're a smoker and you make an announcement that you're going to stop smoking, or you decided you announce that you're not going to drink anymore, or, whatever your vice might be, that announcement, it's the announcement that sets you up for failure. Instead, just go and do it. Don't announce it. Don't tell people that you're changing your diet, that you're going to exercise more, that you're going to give up alcohol or cigarettes, or you're going to eat less, whatever it is. I think it is important not to tell people unless it's necessary. Obviously, you've got to tell people, if from a medical perspective, if that is important. But the less you say about what you're doing, the less you say about the things in your life that you want to change. I mean, it may, of course, be that nothing needs to be changed, but the less you talk about it, I think in this case, with this full moon, the greater your chances of eventual success. Libra. One aspect we have the beginning of a weekend is a quincunx between Venus and Jupiter. And this Venus, when you hear a quincunx, that's a sort of quite a sort of minor aspect. And does one have to use quincunxes when one's interpreting a chart? Well, I think one should if it's close enough. And so Venus Jupiter is a certain mismatch. And of course, Venus is your ruler. And it's like, you are doing things, and you're perhaps enjoying yourself, or you're doing something that just feels comfortable, feels right. And then the quincunx to Jupiter comes along, and there's something bothering you. You're feeling that it's just not quite good enough. And the question is, why is it not quite good enough? Now, it may feel that it's not quite good enough because you're not being ambitious enough, or perhaps you're doing something which conflicts with your ambition. There may be, for example, a distinction between, what you enjoy and what your obligations are. And when I talk about obligations, I'm thinking about particularly obligations to your ambitions, in a way, your obligations to yourself. And so it may be difficult to have a relaxing weekend, particularly on Saturday. You should be able to relax on Saturday. You should be able to, maybe meet up with people, but it's not people who are just easygoing, where there's nothing to worry about, no conflict, but there's just something bothering you, and so maybe you should think about what it is. And if we're talking about Jupiter here, we're talking about Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer for you, Libra, is quite ambitious, and it just may be something you feel that you need to. That you need to address. And Jupiter in Cancer can also represent the influence of authority figures, maybe authority figures who no longer exist, who no longer are around. For example, your parents or whoever brought you up, people who they might be long dead, they might have died decades ago, but they're still there. Their influence is still there, and they're influencing how you are doing and how you are perceiving what you're doing. So that Venus quincunx Jupiter just could be, a slight complication. And, additionally, we've got the Moon conjunct Jupiter at the beginning of a weekend. And, Moon Jupiter conjunction, it is a good aspect, but it's an aspect that wants to be expressed in a particular way. And as far as you're concerned, Libra, I think that you feel that you want to express this aspect through achievement, by focusing on something that is important to you, not just doing nothing. You could do nothing, but I don't think that's what you necessarily want to do, and so it's just a bit difficult to relax. And it may be a good thing that it's difficult to relax, because it's something is driving you on. It wants more from you. It's not enough just to be creative. You've got to be creative in a way that serves some higher good. Now we also have a full moon. So we've got a full moon in a Leo, and so with this full moon, it might be a good idea to think about some of your aspirations, what you're trying to achieve, what you are trying to get together, and it may occur to you that perhaps some kind of reset is in order. What is it all about? What is your life all about? What happens beyond the ambition? You can have an ambition, but that's quite sort of mundane. What happens beyond that ambition? What are your goals for the long-term future? And this full moon may make you really think about it. You know that you want to do something that is a fundamental expression of you, but perhaps it has to go further than that. And we might be talking about society at large. And this full moon might, for example, have a political dimension, or have something of an activist to it, or what's a way to describe it? What can you do to have a favourable impact on wider society? So that could be a question that this full moon is forcing you to address. Yeah, you're good at things, but so what? Why are you good at things? What is the purpose? What are you contributing to society? How are you making the world a better place? And the full moon might really make you think about that. And you shouldn't forget that Libra is actually quite a political sign. Not every Libran, but you have an aware of political dynamics. And when I talk about politics, I'm just talking about. I might just be talking about your community. What's wrong with your community? It's what could you do to improve your community? And so that might be a way the full moon works. And then we can see the full moon in terms of the contrast between you and the collective. Of course, you are different from the collective. You must make it clear that you are different from the collective. You are special, but on the other hand, you are not separate from the collective. You are part of the collective, and certainly if you look at it in terms of collective unconscious, for sure you are. So perhaps that's the real question for the weekend. What is your role? Scorpio. Full moon in Scorpio. No, it's a full moon in Leo. The full moon in Leo is important for you, and it's important because it's asking you to go further, to consider other things. We have recently had, well, it's still going. We have a load of planets in Aquarius, and these planets at the bottom of your chart, they are very much about who you are, what's important to you, what your roots are, making sure that you are protecting yourself, and there might be a feeling that you have to put up the barricades. I mean, that might be how you feel. I mean, that can be a Scorpio reaction. Scorpio can be a very self-protective sign. But then you've got this full moon, and the full moon may represent something from the outside kind of knocking on your door. I mean, not literally knocking on your door, but it's trying to be in contact with you. It's telling you that things are fine, but things are better. Things could be better. Furthermore, it's asking you, well, what are you doing? What should you be doing? It's not enough to just stay where you are. It's not enough to just look after your own interests. There's something else that needs to be done. And it might just be a realization. It may not be a phone call or a knock on a door or an email. It just might be just something you realize. You realize that, it's just not quite good enough. You're not pushing yourself as hard as you should. And, it just might be a voice from the past. Someone from the past who has your best interests at heart. This person might not be around anymore, but still they're there. They have been incorporated into your sort of psychic system, maybe the super ego, if you want to look at things from a Freudian perspective. And so something's telling you that you've got to go further. And so as far as possible, Scorpio, this weekend, particularly on Sunday, try to work out what it is, and don't get too annoyed. So if you are being pressurized, whether by yourself or by some sort of outside entities, outside people, don't respond in an overly self-protected way. I mean, you could, because Mars is still conjunct Pluto. In fact, Mars is exactly conjunct Pluto from a heliocentric view. You could express irritation, but that's not, I don't think, the right approach. Instead, you have to consider, Scorpio, what are you being asked to do? And I think that, in general, it's a time to think about, being more proactive, being more willing to engage, because I think engagement, is required. Otherwise, you're missing something out, and you can almost sort of collapse in on yourself, and that's obviously not something we want to do. I mean, it's not going to happen quite like that, but while we've got these 5 planets in Aquarius, it's just a little bit too much. And perhaps, Scorpio, you're taking yourself ever so slightly too seriously, and that this full moon is telling you, Scorpio, that you just need to go beyond yourself and really ask, what is required of you. What do you need to do? I mean, we could be just completely material about it and say this says something about your career or a business or something that you can do well at, and you have sort of ignored the possibility, or you perhaps haven't put enough effort into the job you're doing, and you've been a bit too self-protective, and the full moon may indicate a change. So if you're in a job, then the full moon might indicate that something has shifted or is shifting, and over the next couple of weeks, as as the moon sort of starts to wane, and as you move towards the towards the new moon, which of course new moon in a couple of weeks' time, then you might find that there are things going on at work which are important, and that you need to perhaps pull out the stops. Perhaps it's just a question of you having you've built something up. Maybe you've done it very well, and now with this full moon, it's time to release that energy in a way that I think will be entirely constructive. Sagittarius. It's kind of a relief, isn't it, that the moon is moving into a Leo. I mean, the moon in Cancer, hasn't been so bad, but with the moon in Cancer, you might have at times felt that you weren't fully able to be yourself, at least in a social sense, that you had to perhaps keep some things back, and there were maybe things to be working through, but you had to work through, and that could be how you were feeling on Saturday. And with the moon moving into Leo, it just brightens things up, and you're just feeling better about everything, and there just all of a sudden there are sort of more possibilities, and we have to think about also how these sort of challenges, if there are any challenges, how they might be presenting themselves. And one aspect we have on Saturday is a quincunx between Venus and Jupiter. So Venus in Aquarius is at makes an 150-degree aspect to Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer, perhaps that represents you, perhaps you with a particular approach, perhaps taking things quite seriously. And then Venus in Aquarius can represent a disturbance, or something being said, something being done, a social interaction, which kind of gives you pause for thought. You thought everything was fine, you'd got things together, and then you have this quincunx, and that Venus in Aquarius, it may represent another person, it may represent a relationship that could at some level be challenging you, making you think again. And so with that Venus quincunx Jupiter, perhaps ask yourself what needs to be done. And I think maybe at the beginning of a weekend, you maybe need to have a conversation, or you need to talk to someone, or you need to go somewhere just to make something clear. And I don't think you should just be keeping yourself to yourself on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we've got the moon moving into Leo. Again, as I already said, I think that is a good thing. Suddenly, there's more going on. There's more to be excited about. And the moon, obviously eventually makes that opposition to the sun, got the full moon. And so Sagittarius, that encourages you to sort of take many of your ideas, your thoughts, your plans. These ideas, thoughts and plans, might have all been sort of a bit chaotic. You haven't quite known where to put things together, and perhaps that might explain some of your inactivity recently, or your reluctance to get involved with things. And suddenly this full moon gives you a chance to see everything in perspective, and perhaps most importantly to see the connections with things. And at some level you don't necessarily want those connections to exist, you just rather stay as you are. But now with the full moon, it's clear, and it's clear that lots of things that have been going on recently are all connected. And once you see those connections, it's absolutely obvious what it all means, and where you're being moved to. I was looking at the comments to my last video, and someone was commenting. I think they took exception to my use of the word coincidence, suggesting that, I was suggesting there are coincidences. I think I was talking about the sinking of a Wilhelm Gustloff and the fact that it took place on January the 30th, and Wilhelm Gustloff was named after a Swiss Nazi who was born on January the 30th, and January the 30th was also the day Hitler came to power. And I think I might have suggested it's a coincidence, and I think the commenter was suggesting, well, seems to be suggesting there aren't any coincidences, and I think I would agree with that. Maybe I was using this term coincidence just a bit too lightly, but maybe as far as you're concerned, you likewise shouldn't just see a load of coincidences. It's easy to see a load of coincidences with those 5 planets in Aquarius. Just things happening, one thing happens, another thing happens, they all seem disconnected, and then the full moon comes along and it suddenly becomes clear. It's obvious. They really are connected. And maybe there are no coincidences. And perhaps when you can go beyond the coincidences, when you can see everything as like a single field, then it's obvious, and it's obvious to you, what you should be doing and where you should be going, and perhaps also what you should be believing in. I mean, this is a full moon in Leo, and belief does matter. Belief is particularly important, if you're a Sagittarius. I'm sure you already have your beliefs, and I'm not going to tell you what to believe in, but just maybe with this full moon, once you start to put things together, there may be some shifts in what you believe in. So don't be too precious about your religion or your philosophies or your politics, because something might change and something might realign. Not just over the weekend, but over the next couple of weeks. Capricorn, there is a Moon-Jupiter conjunction right at the beginning of the weekend, and of course that takes place in Cancer. So at the beginning of the weekend, there may be, some focus on relationships, on other people, how you get on with other people. I think Moon-Jupiter conjunction is a great aspect, and that Moon-Jupiter conjunction will be particularly important if you're in Australia and New Zealand, because it will be exact sort of in the middle of the day. If you're not, it may be sort of more of a subtle influence, but it's still there. We also have a trine between the Moon and Saturn on Saturday. So Moon conjunct Jupiter, moving towards a Moon trine Saturn, suggests to me that at the beginning of a weekend, you should find that your relations with other people, are pretty good. They work well, and with the Moon trine Saturn, you certainly have a degree of authority. I think that people will listen to you. They'll listen to to what you say, and if you've got any ideas, feel free. I mean, you've got things to say. You've worked certain things out, so you shouldn't necessarily keep it all to yourself. Now, the Moon does change sign. Moon moves out of Cancer and it moves into Leo, and of course, when it moves into Leo, it makes a full moon, because the Moon, it starts to make a full moon. The Moon, first of all, makes opposition aspects to Mars and Pluto, and then it makes an opposition to the Sun. And so, with this Leo full moon, it might be that you start to realize that nothing is quite as simple as it seems, and this may particularly apply to relationships. You may have, for example, made some assumptions about another person, based on their behavior, at least based on their obvious behavior. But as time progresses, you change those assumptions, and you start to see things in a quite different way. And you maybe realize that another person, they are quite complicated, and that might mean that certain relationships, have to change. Again, not immediately, but perhaps over the next couple of weeks, you will sort of get sort of more evidence, and the power structures perhaps need to change. I'm not necessarily talking about long-term relationships. It could just be all of the various relationships in your life, short-term, long-term, whatever. And as far as the dynamics are concerned, that full moon can be quite a financially orientated event. It can be about what holds things together, and particularly on a material level. And perhaps you start to see that financial issues may become important, and money is something that you try to sort of maybe discount. Money shouldn't be important, but maybe money is important. Maybe the financial side of things just should not be ignored. And where there is money, there is the potential for emotion, because the money and emotion can be connected. People do get really upset about money, and a number of relationships can have a financial underpinning. And so perhaps with this full moon, this might occur to you, and it might occur to you over the next couple of weeks that another person really is influenced by money. You didn't think they were influenced by money, but actually they are, and you start to see it in their behavior. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're a bad person. It doesn't mean to say that the relationship has to end or anything like that, but the financial dimension always makes itself felt. I mean, if it's a new relationship to begin with, maybe money isn't important, but then eventually it starts to become important. So I think the full moon overall, Capricorn, it's ever so slightly complicated. I mean, just because it's complicated, though, doesn't mean you can't handle it. I think actually Capricorn, being an earth sign, I think you're going to be very good at handling it. So just don't see people and their motivations in one way. You've got to look at everything. And yeah, you do have to look at the financial side of things as well. Aquarius, full moon this weekend, full moon in Leo. And because it's a full moon in Leo, that means that Aquarius, your sign is impacted, because we have the sun in Aquarius opposition the moon in Leo, and this opposition right across the main axis of your chart, and so this full moon could say something about other people with the moon in Leo, and the moon in Leo may represent someone who needs to be considered. Perhaps you haven't considered them in the past, you'd neglected them, but suddenly they're on the horizon, they're present, they need your attention. Now, you could respond to the situation by just ignoring them or trying to push someone to one side, because the moon is quite weak here. I mean, it's not a very strong moon, and so that the moon might represent someone who is not on very good form, who they've been struggling recently, they can't fully express themselves, and yeah, it's possible that you could just blot them out. But I would not recommend that course of action. You have to show some sympathy and understanding and consideration. Not just because you're a nice person, but because you need to see what someone has to offer, and you have to listen to what they have to say. It could be important, and it could relate to your own interests, and it might occur to you while you're at it that recently you had been just a bit too focused on yourself, and you just need to sort of lighten up a bit. So that's something that I think that you need to do. And so if you have social interactions at the end of a weekend, then really be careful how you behave, and probably make a special effort to listen to what another person is saying. Now, we could see this full moon, with the moon moving out of Cancer into Leo, as someone new arriving on the scene. At first, you hardly notice them, but they have arrived, and that might not apply. That applies not just to the weekend, but over the next couple of weeks. So as you see someone new arriving on the scene, ask yourself, how important is this person? Maybe they're more important than they seem, and as time progresses, they're going to have more and more of an influence. And it could be, I have to be open to these possibilities, that this full moon one might represent a new relationship, or at least a new phase in a relationship. A full moon, you think of a full moon in terms of some kind of crisis. Could be. In a relationship with someone, there's a full moon. That means that something has to be appreciated and realized, and maybe the relationship will change. But I think with this full moon, particularly when the moon moves into Leo's, someone wants your attention. And I think you should give them your attention. You don't have to give them all your attention. You don't have to give anything away. You're powerfully placed. It's not going to hurt you, but it is probably the right thing to do. Pisces. At the moment, Pisces, there's not, I don't think, a massive amount happening. I wouldn't have said it need be a hugely busy weekend. Now on Saturday we've got Venus making a quincunx to Jupiter. So Jupiter is of course your ruler, and it's a quincunx, and Venus quincunx Jupiter might be something that you have to take into account, or at least you should take into account, that you don't really want to take into account. And Venus might represent something sort of hidden, or that at least had been hidden, and you're not quite sure how to deal with it, and it might just be hidden in terms of your own unconscious, something coming into conscious awareness, and it comes into conscious awareness, and you're not entirely comfortable with it, because perhaps it makes things rather complicated, but you were happy doing something you enjoyed. It was all working. Perhaps you thought you got it all together. Then something else appears on the scene. Maybe you just have a thought. Something occurs to you, and that might change everything. But it's not. It's a quincunx. Remember, it's not an opposition. It needn't be that dramatic. But if you are troubled or puzzled, then don't just discard the thought. Perhaps consider the possibility that there's something you'd missed, and if you want to really be truly creative, really do something that really is a fundamental part of who you are, then there's something else that needs to be integrated, and perhaps that's what the Venus quincunx Jupiter is all about. And it might be something stylistic. You can be doing something well, but how it appears might also be important, because it's Venus. Venus is the planet of style, and appearances, to an extent, are important. They're not that important, but they can just add to your feeling of competence, and it's maybe also going to be easier for you to sort of present yourself, to the outside world, and get the support and appreciation that you deserve. Now, additionally, we do have a full moon over the weekend. Now, this full moon is in Leo, and with this full moon, it might be a realization about how you are leading your life, on a quite micro level, sort of on an hourly level, minute by minute. what you're doing, what are you doing at this particular time, how have you organized yourself, how your calendar is. It just might be a realization that things aren't as good as they should be. Perhaps it's just that you have to be better organized. You perhaps have got stuck into a routine that may in a way be slightly chaotic, that you might feel that it's very much a part of who you are, and being independent-minded is important. But if you're so independent-minded that you always do things your way, that in itself can be quite chaotic, and you lose structure and you lose touch with what's happening around you. And this full moon just may encourage you, Pisces, to really think again about how you are structuring your life. And you need to put yourself first, of course. I mean, that is important. And decide what works for you. And if you decide what works for you, then you do it. You don't compromise, and you say, well, you want to be doing particular things at particular times of day, and you don't allow anything to interrupt the schedule. And so that may be a good way of using the full moon. And of course, the full moon potentially has a health dimension, and it just may be that from a health perspective, right now you need a little bit of order and structure, and the full moon is telling you what you need to do. And the question is, are you going to listen to that full moon? Just because there is a full moon doesn't mean we listen to its message. Just because we're shown the truth of the matter, it doesn't mean that we actually take it on board in terms of actual activity. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to switch to the I Ching. I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 63, which is after completion. So this hexagram is about crossing the river. We've arrived at the other side. At the other side, we're on the far bank. So it might be that we've made a transition. It's mission accomplished. We've reached our goal, and so that should feel great. But after completion, it's so often the case, isn't it? We feel we've done something. We were really struggling to do it. We do it. We get there. Things have changed. Now what? And this can be the problem. Having done all of that, we might find that actually things are actually quite chaotic because we don't know the rules. We don't know what to do next. And very often, after completion can be a time of chaos. We just don't know. And things can, in a worst case scenario, they can start to fall apart. And, because we've made the completion, but what about the process? The process is still ongoing. We're still getting used to a new world, a new environment, and maybe we're not doing a particularly good job. At least that is the danger. Now, we have a moving line. The second line moves. The second line from the bottom. And the symbolism with the second line from the bottom is a woman in a carriage, and there is a screen. And the screen exists, I assume, to protect her from view, people looking in on the carriage. I assume that's what it is, although the I Ching doesn't really make it very clear, at least the translations that I've looked at. It doesn't make it clear about why she would need that screen, but I'm assuming it's to do with some kind of sort of modesty, and she doesn't want prying strangers to be seeing what she's doing. But anyway, she loses the screen. And so that might represent a position of disadvantage. It's the fact that, firstly, we've lost something, and secondly, we're in a situation, we're suddenly in a situation where we are at a disadvantage. we feel perhaps that we're revealing too much. Perhaps it's about boundaries as well. I mean, if you think a woman in a carriage with the screen, a lot of boundaries there, and those boundaries may be all over the place, and that is because we've just made a big transition. But what the I Ching advises here with the screen is telling a woman, don't run after the screen. You will get it back, and that applies to sort of everything that we have lost. We may feel we've lost something. We may have to chase it. We're not going to get it back. But yeah, we are going to get it back. And how long? Well, maybe it's 7 days. Maybe it's when the process has finished. Because, this hexagram 63 is quite complicated. And it's because we're just getting used to a new order, a new environment, and in a rush something's got lost. But we will get it back, and the key thing is not to run after it, because what is yours is yours. If it genuinely belongs to you, certainly at a spiritual level, it will always come back. I mean, of course, if you've dropped $100 in the street and someone picks it up, you're probably not going to get it back. But I think it's perhaps talking about other things, although it could be material. If you have lost something, and it's really on your mind, and you're looking all over for it, perhaps the suggestion here is you will get it back. So if there is a sudden loss, it's saying don't panic, you will get it back. Now I'm not advocating that you do nothing. So if you've lost something important, I'm not saying you should do nothing and you should just wait for it to be sent back to you. No, I'm not saying that. But perhaps it's quite sort of reassuring that you try your best to get hold of it, and maybe in the end you will get hold of it, but maybe not quite as quickly as you'd hope. But I think that with this moving line, I think that there is something quite optimistic about it, and don't panic. And then we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is waiting. And we've just had this big transition, and what now? Well, in the end, we're going to have to do more. We have not seen it through. There's more work to be done. And so the image here might be that we've crossed the river, we've landed on the other side, and we're just waiting. What next? Well, let's just wait and see. But maybe that's not the right approach. I mean, we can't wait forever, and perhaps we have to realize that at some stage we are going to have to take action. Because, waiting, you wait for a particular length of time, then you have to take the action. So you can't just wait for someone to just come along and tell you what to do. Or in fact, they probably will tell you what to do if you wait for too long. But it's a good idea to consider what your next step is. It's not like you have to take that action, but you must be really getting ready for it over the weekend. But looking at these two hexagrams, after completion, moving to waiting, I mean, I think it is quite dynamic, and it's saying, okay, you've done something, you've been successful up to a point, but now you have to start getting ready to move to the next stage. And if you feel that you've lost something, that you've put yourself at a disadvantage, don't worry. It will resolve itself, in time. And perhaps just this period of chaos just needs to run its course, and then you'll get what you're looking for. You'll get what you lost, and you'll also be ready to take the next step. And finally, I want to look at the full moon. And we do have a full moon over the weekend. So here is let's find the chart of the full moon. There it is. So the full moon takes place on Sunday, February the 1st, quite late in the evening, London time. I make it 10:09. I make it. So let me just check on that time. I didn't look in the ephemeris. I use my program. Let's see what the effect. Just check it. I don't want to embarrass myself by getting the wrong time. I mean, I've looked using one source. It's always best to double check with these things, because getting the time wrong, can be can be, really not what you want to do. So this full moon is at 10:09. Yeah, so it is at 10:09 p.m. And so right at the end of the weekend, London time. So if you're in the Americas, then it would be on Sunday afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it would be early on Monday. So yeah, it does depend where you are. So if we're talking about a full moon, it could be about the end of something, or it could be about a point of realization. Things have reached a certain point, and now we see them for what they are. And we've got all those planets in Aquarius. We've been watching all these planets form in Aquarius, and it's a lot of planets in Aquarius, and a lot of people have a lot of astrologers have gone on about it. They've seen it as a game changer, the end of civilization as we know it, all this kind of stuff. And certainly something's going on. The world is getting really, really complicated. And then the moon comes along. The moon makes an opposition to the sun, and so that poor moon in Leo, I mean, it's already at some disadvantage being in Leo, because I don't think Leo is a great sign for the moon to be in. Then it's exactly opposition to the sun, but something gives, and we start to see what it's all about. And there could be a feeling of sort of reality to an extent. But we shouldn't forget that there are no planets in Earth signs. So a full moon with no planets in Earth signs might indicate that sort of any realization is quite mental. It's quite an intellectual realization, but also with that full moon, that moon carries a lot. All the fire is in that moon. All the fire in the sky, all the fire in the cosmos is with that moon. Okay, Neptune's in Leo. As far as Earth signs, okay, you could say, oh, Uranus is in Taurus, but Neptune, Uranus, these are outer planets. And so with moon in Leo, that's the fire. And so the question is, what should we do? How do we respond? And it's going to be difficult to respond. Because the moon is quite weak, but we have to try our hardest. We have to try our hardest to make those connections, and it may not be easy, especially as the moon is applying to a sesquiquadrate with Saturn. So the Saturn just put a sort of rather a damper on the moon. So I think that moon is. The moon is weak here, and okay, the sun is weak as well, you could argue, because it's in Aquarius, a sign of its detriment. But so it might be about having a realization, seeing what's going on, but do we actually have the ability to act on this realization? And maybe just very difficult for many of us to see it through. And again, it really doesn't help the fact that Saturn is involved with it. And it's additionally, you could argue that it's quite an angry full moon. I mean, it's conjunct Mars. And it's 6 degrees off Mars. It's also on the Venus-Mars midpoint. But I'll be looking at that in a moment. So so that's the full moon. It's not necessarily a dramatic full moon, but I think it's just a difficult full moon, and I think we have to see it in the context of all those Aquarius planets. We have this build-up, and the moon sort of makes us think about it. What is this build-up, all about? Now, as far as the dial is concerned, if we put all of this on the dial, so there's the full moon. Now, remember, it's a 90-degree dial. So a full moon is shown as a conjunction because it's at 13 degrees 4 fixed. So the way the dial works, you see the first 30 degrees are all the cardinal signs, and then we move to the fixed signs. So they will occupy, the same midpoints. So this full moon is on sort of two midpoints of note: the Mercury-Pluto midpoint and also the Venus-Mars midpoint. So that gives us a different view of this full moon. I mean, this full moon is quite seductive. It doesn't seem seductive at first, but being on the Mercury-Pluto and the Venus-Mars midpoint, it's a time where people are trying to seduce and attract. And Mercury-Pluto is more about verbal attraction, using clever words to perhaps manipulate people into following a program, following a narrative. Clever words. Venus-Mars is perhaps more about sexual attraction. It's about sort of desire. But it's about people being attractive, whether it's physically attractive or through the words they use. And so, overall, it is a seductive full moon. And perhaps one is being seduced into believing things, seduced into following people, maybe seduced into forming relationships. And so the question is, who is doing the seducing? Is it you? Is it someone else? And so if you're dealing with clever, charming people, be careful, because they may lead you somewhere where you don't want to go. And it's not just people; it's anyone that is pushing a narrative. So that's that is a way in which we can see this full moon. Now, as far as the geography is concerned, I mean, I did the sort of astrocartography of it. So let's look at the maps. Where does the full moon appear to be prominent? So you can see that the full moon goes through, this is, if we take the map of the world, it seems to go through Kiev, potentially sort of may go through Egypt. So that's one place perhaps to look out for. It may go through part of the Americas. Does it go through Caracas, the capital of Venezuela? We might also ask, does it go through Tehran? So I mean, it is exactly on Kiev. I think that might be of some importance. So let's look at the charts. So as far as the charts are concerned, what we're going to do is we're going to relocate the full moon to Washington, D.C. So here's the relocation. So if we relocate the full moon to Washington, D.C., the moon is rising. That is true. So the full moon is kind of on the ascendant. Mars is on the descendant. So from a perspective of Washington, I think it's perhaps somewhat difficult. It's maybe somewhat bellicose. I mean, the part of fortune is always going to be on the descendant, by the way, when you set a full moon. I mean, that's just the way it is. There's nothing spectacular about that. You will always find a part of fortune on the descendant with a full moon. But Mars is on that descendant. That talks about perhaps foreign enemies. Just conflict in general. So I would not have said that it was a particularly easy full moon for America. And the question is, does this talk about foreign enemies, or perhaps it's what's going on domestically? Although there's nothing sort of on the IC So maybe that's not the issue. The issue here, but no, I think it probably is. I mean, it's quite a difficult and sort of angry full moon. And of course, when one's talking about the Americas, one's thinking about Caracas. So here's a horoscope for Caracas. Here's a full moon for Caracas. So Mars is on the descendant with this full moon in Caracas, and Mars is on the descendant for the full moon for Washington, D.C. So, that could suggest that there are more sort of efforts to sort of undermine the Venezuelan regime. I mean, I know that that's what Trump is trying to do, although we're also getting stories that he's getting on quite, that there is some kind of relationship between the new president, what's her name? Mrs. Rodriguez, isn't it? What's her first name? But anyway, I don't think that Venezuela is going to leave the news cycle. And anything in Tehran? I mean, we should think about Tehran. I mean, let's just sort of talk about America bombing Tehran or going back to war with Iran. I mean, this doesn't say that nothing is going to happen. But, I mean, Uranus is in the 7th house if we set the chart for Tehran, but it's not exactly there. I don't think there's anything necessary to report. I mean, Uranus on the 7th, yes, of course, that might indicate from an Iranian perspective, what one's enemies are up to, and there could be some kind of sort of upset or shock. And Gaza. Yeah, the moon is on the midheaven, but I don't think there's I mean, it's not exactly on the midheaven. And then there is the chart for Kiev. This is perhaps a more significant chart because if we set the full moon to Kiev, we've got the moon on the midheaven, we've got the sun on the IC, we've got Mars pretty close to the IC. And so if we're talking about full moons, we're talking about a realization. Something is becoming clear in Kiev, in Ukraine, regarding the war and how it's working out, and also about the government. So I think there is a sort of a process of realization going on. And I think that the full moon, with the moon being exactly on the midheaven, I think that perhaps indicates that the next couple of weeks may be quite important in Ukraine. I mean, of course, it's always important in the Ukraine, but so we have to look at the full moon precisely and what it means. And I just think it's about the penny dropping, realizing perhaps that they've got to compromise, realizing that the war can't go on forever, that they've got to do something to stop it. And I would not have said that this full moon is particularly good for Zelensky or his leadership. I mean, I know that he's always under pressure, but perhaps over the next couple of weeks, the pressure is going to perhaps be more than usual as people realize the truth of the matter. And then there are a few people who might be impacted by this full moon. One of those people is Barack Obama. Of course, he doesn't have any explicit power at the moment, but he is born on August the 4th, 1961. He has got his sun at 12 degrees 33 Leo. So this full moon is right on his sun. And so I think he's likely to feel it. It says something about his plans, his self-expression. His sun is quite close to the descendant. I mean, I don't know what's happening with his relationship with his wife. But I would have thought probably quite a difficult full moon, and he realizes something, recognizes something, and I mean it's in his 6th sun. He's got the sun in the 6th. Maybe there's some health issue that he has to attend to or would be advised to attend to. But are we going to notice what happens with this full moon on Barack Obama's sun? Probably not. Turning to the UK, the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, I think he's the Justice Secretary. I mean, he is a lawyer, and he's been sort of starting to push for the end of jury trials for some cases. I think sort of more minor cases. People are not very happy about it, and he was foreign secretary. I mean, I think the general consensus is that he's not doing a particularly good job, and he's got his Mars at 13 degrees 10 Leo. Okay, we don't know what time he's born, but his Mars will be somewhere, 13, probably 13 something Leo. And so having a full moon on his Mars might mean that something goes wrong. There's an irritation here. There's a conflict. His Mars is square his true black moon Lilith. And so David Lammy and how he relates to perhaps other members of the government, and what kind of ways in which he gets criticized. He might personally get angry with this full moon, but people may see something about David Lammy that doesn't necessarily put him in a good light. So I think David Lammy has to be careful about his own behaviour. I think it could be quite a difficult full moon for him. If you are following British politics and another. There are some other politicians. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. This full moon is on her ascendant, so I think a very important full moon for Giorgia Meloni. And remember, she's got Saturn on her ascendant as well, so the full moon definitely having an impact on her. I think that that may say something about her government and what's happening in Italy. Just something she has to deal with, which relates to her Saturn. I mean, she's her Saturn has worked very well for her. I mean, she is a very successful Italian prime minister in terms of longevity. I mean, she's been in her position for a couple of years, which by Italian standards is really amazing. But this full moon on Saturn is perhaps forcing her to think about her authority and how she is presenting herself and how she's making an impact. And it's relatively close to her Uranus. I mean, she's got Uranus square her ascendant. So I think that there may be a challenge to her authority. Something crops up that she has to deal with, over the next couple of weeks. Another female politician who doesn't have any direct power, who would like to be a president, is Marine Le Pen. So Marine Le Pen was born on August the 5th, 1968. So she would be having some kind of court case coming up because a court has prevented her from standing for the presidency. I mean, she has been banned from standing for political office because of some sort of financial discrepancy when she was in the European Parliament, and she has got her sun at 13 degrees 2 Leo. So this full moon impacts her directly. It could be that this full moon does represent a judgment going against her, saying she can't stand for office. I don't know. I haven't been following French politics. I don't know when this judgment is due, but I think this full moon, again, could be difficult, but maybe it's an opportunity for her. She's got the sun in Leo in the 10th house, and maybe having moon in Leo in the 10th house, there's something she can take advantage of to boost her career. But still, I think the full moon does say something about an important change as far as her political ambitions are concerned and how she presents herself politically. And there are actually a lot of politicians. I've got female politicians. We've got Kemi Badenoch, British Prime Minister. No, not Prime. She wants to be British Prime Minister. She's not. She's leader of the opposition, and her party's falling apart. Or it seems to be. She's getting a lot of defections. And Kemi Badenoch has her Venus at 13 degrees Aquarius. So this full moon is opposition her Venus. Venus is the planet of relating, and I mean, she needs to relate in terms of getting on with people in her party, but her party seems to be under new pressure. I think the problem she's got is that people on the right are starting to leave her party because there's been this defections of this woman, what's her name, Suella Braverman, who was on the right of her party, and she's gone over to Reform. And so this could be that, defections, this defection, maybe there'll be another defection, or something happens that it potentially could be quite damaging because it is hitting her Venus, and how she relates to her party, and how she can bring people together. And of course, she has a reputation of having a slightly abrasive personality. Maybe that's with the Venus in Aquarius, perhaps being just a little bit too independent there. But so she is someone to watch. And then we're in a very difficult times in America. I mean, politicians are always sort of being pressured, and people do crazy things. And the governor of, I think she's still the governor of, is it Michigan? Gretchen Whitmer. She has got her Mars at 13 degrees 38 Aquarius. So this full moon is hitting her Mars. And she's got Mars on the North Node, Mars conjunct the North Node. And so full moon hitting, quite a powerful Mars. We have a time of birth for her. So in fact, she's got the Mars conjunct the North Node square the part of fortune. So that full moon really does hit her. And of course, if you're talking about the Lake States, we've also got all these issues in Minneapolis, in Minneapolis and Minnesota. And so, as far as advice to Gretchen Whitmer is concerned, there was supposedly this attempt to kidnap her some years ago. I think she probably has to be a little more careful than usual with her security over the next couple of weeks. I mean, there are a lot of crazy people out there, crazy people on both sides of a political aisle. And if people have tried to kidnap her in the past, maybe there's another attempt to attack her or do something like that. So probably over the next couple of weeks, in the wake of this full moon, she should probably be careful about her security. She also needs to be careful how she responds. I mean, Mars in Aquarius, with the full moon, she might sort of do something that she later regrets. But it's Mars. Mars is a male planet, so aggressive men she should probably steer clear of with this full moon on her Mars. And so I think that's about it. Okay, another woman in politics is Alice Weidel, one of the heads of the German AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, and she's got her Mars at 13 Aquarius. So in a way, the advice I gave to Gretchen Whitmer probably applies to Alice Weidel as well, even though they are at completely the opposite ends of a political spectrum. She is, of course, pretty right-wing. That's the AfD. And so with the full moon on her Mars, she has to be careful about what she does. She has to be careful about her security. I mean, there are crazy people out there, of all political on the whole political spectrum. So so she needs to be careful. So that's it. That's all I want to say about the full moon. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again very soon.